Stephen Reid from Michell Wool, great to have you with us on Country Viewpoint again.
Thank you, Ricky.
This week in the auctions, how's the sales gone?
Look, it's an interesting week. It was a reasonable offering. 34,500 bales were put up. 12.7% were passed in. So still a pretty good clearance. Two selling days in the three centres, Melbourne, Sydney and Fremantle. The first day, the Tuesday, was pretty soft actually, but then towards the end of the second day, the market actually picked up a lot of activity going on, both in Europe and Southeast Asia and mainly China, of course, being our biggest customer. But the Wally indicator fell 9 cents to close at 13.52. It closed on a very positive note.
Well, that's good to hear. And another positive note we heard across the week, I'm going from memory here, but I think ABARES projected across this financial year wool prices might go up around 13%. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, they're smarter than me. There's so much instability in the world, and there are some good people at ABARES, and I've had a bit to do with them over time, but they have to pick a number. But it does certainly look more positive than negative. But as I've said before to Jason, my crystal ball gets a bit fuzzy going too far forward.
Is there a factor there when it comes to logistics as well, potentially? The expectation that notwithstanding the Delta strain and infections, countries and Australia will start opening up again?
Well, the big picture stuff is exactly like that. The wool industry in Northern Hemisphere, which is the major consumer of wool at that retail, really missed a whole season. And you and I both know that you can't keep wearing the same clothes all the time. So there are people out there looking for discretionary spending. We're seeing that in cosmetics. We're seeing it in apparel. The next thing is people are getting out and about again, notwithstanding lockdowns in this country. Our Italian, UK clients, German clients, they're out and about with a green card travelling, and people are starting to dress up to back to work, back to the office. Push is happening in the Northern Hemisphere, and there's an obligation to actually not wear a tracksuit and a floppy Joe or whatever they call them in America.
Yeah.
Put a jacket on. So demand is certainly picking up, and we're seeing bits of that. Stock in the pipeline is very low. Logistics in terms of booking vessels and getting containers is a nightmare. Apart from being incredibly expensive, it's just hard to get. So that just-in-time buying for the Northern Hemisphere processors is a thing of the past. They need to rebuild their stocks. So you'd have to say demand is going up. Rebuilding of the pipeline is going up. It's more positive than negative.
Yep. I was talking to a retailer in a totally different area, but she was saying she was stockpiling in her own stocks for the commercial side of things this Christmas. Is there a bit of stockpiling going on in the wool market as well?
Well, I think there's a bit of stockpiling going on with growers. Financial conditions for wool growers are pretty good, so if the price isn't right, they're not selling it, and they can hold wool for 6 months, 12 months. Goodness me, you can keep it for 10 years if you keep it dry. So there's a bit of a holding back of wool, but certainly that pipeline, so between early stage processors, spinners, weavers, knitters, cut and sew, if you're expecting things to turn up just in time, you can't. So you've got to get more inventory around you. Interest rates are relatively low. The price of wool is attractive on a long term, or even on a 10-year basis. It's well below the 50 percentile. So I wouldn't call it stockpiling, but certainly manufacturers who focus on running factories around the clock don't run out of raw material. Otherwise, you'll struggle. You'll lose staff, and we all know, both here and our factory in China, to retain staff and keep them busy is critical. Otherwise, you lose them.
Now, I wanted to ask about the wool poll in a moment, but first, the bales up for auction next week. How's that looking?
Much the same. It's rostered at 37,000 bales. Typically over the weekends we find 1,000 or 2,000 bales are withdrawn, which is an interesting trend. Obviously people are working and talking wool on weekends. So I suspect it'll be much the same in terms of bales up, 34,500 to 35,000 bales. So if the trend that we saw in the last 3 or 4 hours of the sale on Wednesday continues, the dollar's a little bit softer, I think we're looking for a fairly solid week.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, on to this challenging market into which our grower representatives go into, the new logistical and other worlds. How's the wool poll coming together?
Exactly right. Every 3 years, growers who are levy payers, which is pretty much everybody who sells wool, they're obliged to pay the levy, are receiving documents now, some electronic, some in the post, and they need to make a vote in the coming weeks in terms of what they want the wool poll to be. It has been 2% for a very long time, but last vote 3 years ago it was dropped to 1.5%. So there's a heap of information to read there, and it's really critical that growers, rather than sitting on the fence and whinging about where their money is going and so forth, read the information and place a vote. And then just after that, the AGM is coming up, in November. So there's more paperwork coming out to growers who are shareholders, which is a different category. There's almost half of the levy payers have not filled out their paperwork to become shareholders. So while they're reading Walpole, go online or ring up AWI and become a shareholder, and then you get a chance to vote in November on the AGM, which is new directors, as well as a few other matters are being put forward in front of the shareholders. So a really good time for growers to get involved in their industry, not just worrying about the price of wool.
Well, Stephen Reid from Michell Wool, comprehensive information again this week. Thanks so much for your time and have a great weekend.
You too, Ricky. Thanks for your interest.